Hello and welcome to episode 14 of The Dirty Corner. This has been quite the journey. There's not a lot of episodes left, but I've been figuring out what to do with each remaining episode. And this one could have been later in the season, but I'll tell you in a moment why this episode specifically is going to be called And the reason why it's going to be called that is because there are certain things I need to discuss about what actually ended up happening after all of this effort that me and several students made to try and improve certain conditions and try to encourage protections for future students at the school. But first, let me just quickly clear something up. This week's episode was not supposed to be this topic. It was supposed to be later. This is what I meant earlier when I said I'll clear up in a moment why it's called this. The real reason why this episode is called this is because I'm discussing this, and the reason why I'm discussing this topic is because the episode I've been prepping is such a huge workload. Do you remember a few episodes ago, I can't remember which episode it was, but it was only 2 or 3 episodes ago, I said that somewhere I think I have a video of a meeting where students disagree with my point of view of the school. And if I can, I will share that on the podcast because I think that's quite important to have a bit of balance, because a lot of this is just me saying, then this happened and we tried this, but then that happened and then we tried that and that led to this, and it's all either from my perspective or people who are very much aligned with my perspective, like my German friend, my studio friend, the people who were involved with the complaint. And there was another student who I'm going to be referring to as young student number 3. The reason for that is because my prep for what was going to be this episode led to me labeling certain students' names that I just had to come up with to protect their identity. The episode that this was supposed to be would be that video, that meeting that I mentioned, and it started off as a 50-minute long video. But then when I watched it, there were connection issues. There was a big, long introduction that was unnecessary and didn't add any context to the content of the video. So I cut all of that out. And then I'm going through it knowing that when I disguise everyone's voice by putting a voice modulator on everyone except me, because I don't need to be protected. I'm happy to say it's me in the video. Everyone else's voice needs to be covered. All the names need to be removed. All the names need to be changed in the text. I need to type text to support the audio, because the voice modulation will make it so that what they're saying will be slightly garbled. You'll be able to tell with the subtitles what they're saying, but if you didn't have captions in order to accompany the video, it would be difficult to decipher. In the process of typing up these captions, it's taken a lot longer than I had anticipated. Plus, I'm busy doing other things. I have videos that I make for a gallery. I'm trying to do a painting every day, which has been hilarious, great fun and amazing to get me painting quite quickly again. But it's not been a painting a day. I've had paintings stack up. I'm currently at 5 paintings I need to do today. I think, tomorrow it's going to be 5. Today it was 4. And I have 2 that I've started that aren't that far off. And then I had 2 which I started earlier to try and make today work, but there was just no way I could do it. I had other things. Aside from the video for the gallery and the painting, I had other things on the computer I was trying to do. And then also I've been emailing and messaging several people. I've been arranging with artists for the painting podcast and also for my other podcast, Good Values, that I used to do, which I've got episodes recorded that I need to edit, but I haven't had the opportunity to edit. So I've been, contacting artists about that. There's a memorial for an artist who sadly passed this year, an amazing artist called Sue Thomas, and I made a memorial video for her with the assistance of performance artists, so that was really interesting. And I am going to post that on my channel, but it's currently on my Patreon. If you're not aware, I do have a Patreon channel where I post a lot of content that will never be made available on YouTube. Link is in the description, and I would massively appreciate your support. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. I've been busy doing all that stuff, and then on top of that, trying to type out these subtitles. The problems being, someone will say something like, yeah, well, what's happening? Yeah, it's kind of difficult because what we're doing. And I'll say, right, what did they say? They said, what's happening? Yeah, it's difficult because, what did they say? And I'll go back and it'll be, yeah, but what's happening? Yeah, it's been difficult because we've been, and I've been trying to type that as accurately as possible, because if their voice is put through a voice modulator and what you're hearing is, yeah, well, what's happening? In some kind of garbled version of their voice, you're going to hear these sounds, these syllables, and I want it to match up with the words that you can read. That may sound silly, but if they say I put UH. If they say I put UM. That may not be important, but it's, if you're hearing and it sounds different than I want it to make sense. I may be making it much harder work for myself than I need to, but that video is going to be ready, I think, for next week. It's certainly not going to be ready for this week. That's why you're watching this video. Sorry for this long explanation, but that's what I've been doing. It's been really difficult, but and not fun either. The other jobs that I do are quite fun. Like the video for the gallery has been fun, and the paintings have been fun to do. Contacting artists isn't, not fun. It's nice to contact artists. Arranging to go to this memorial, not just me talking to the widow of the artist who I was friends with, but also speaking to the performance artists and giving them the details. And it's just a lot of contacting people, which that's not a problem. It's not a burden. It's editing the episode you were going to watch. That was the burden. Doing the subtitles, that was unpleasant. So you've got this episode this week. The reason why I'm doing this as well is because as an episode, I wanted to try and recap what I've covered so far. Not massively, I'm not going to draw it out dead long, but the fact that there's been, let me think. So it's kind of trying to highlight in each episode the lack of respect that has been shown and exhibited by a lot of students for each other, when some students are perfectly respectful and considerate and they're the ones who get trampled on. There's been issues with music, playing music, and not just to the annoyance of some people, but it was actually played aggressively at points, which I've not discussed that. I might cover that a little bit in this episode as well, because it's not a huge story, but it's just, I'll go into it now. I have a friend who probably wouldn't mind being named on the podcast, but I haven't spoken to him, so I'm just going to refer to him as a mature student. I'll say mature student 1, because there's more than one. Mature student 1 was going to the studios in the 3rd year, towards the time when we were doing a degree show. So we've done the 1st, 2nd, 3rd year. Some students did the foundation. I didn't do it, and a couple of other students didn't do it. The foundation course, which is just 1 year. We did the 3 years, 1st, 2nd and 3rd year. And in the 3rd year we have a degree show. So that's everything is finally kind of culminates in this body of work expressing itself in a show, and everyone's trying to work towards a theme, use the space, and communicate with each other as clearly as possible. And this mature student goes on to campus, mature student number 1, this friend of mine, goes onto campus for the first time for a while because of the pandemic, and he's walking around talking to a couple of people that he sees in the corridors, but he doesn't get around easily. He struggles a lot, and then he'll sit and try and talk to people because he's older. He's an older guy, and he goes into one of the studios and sees some younger students and starts talking to them. And bully number 1 and bully number 2 are aware of his presence, and so they turn up music in their studio so that he's struggling to hear because he has a hearing aid. And that's a way that the music was weaponized in the studios. It wasn't part of any complaint. It was too late on. We'd already done complaints. We were feeling quite exhausted with the complaints process through the university and felt quite disheartened by it. But that's a way that the music that should be something which is a bit of a compromise and a communal thing and things which people do with a bit of consideration was not observed at all and was used in completely the opposite way. So that's the thing as far as music goes. But then there was also stories which I kind of briefly touched on. I didn't fully tell the stories of a student who was bully number 2 who tried to weld iron and steel together, which is extremely hazardous, and he did that in his studio. Bully number 3 tried to burn crude oil, or was burning crude oil in a studio with no ventilation. Not like that would have helped anyway, it's still incredibly dangerous. So things like that were happening, which is just unbelievably dangerous and irresponsible. And then there was a story which I did an episode where bully number 2 had graffitied over other student spaces. Horrible intimidation which occurred, which he completely got away with, and the tutors justified. He gave excuses for, and it was just, really unpleasant. Excuse me for a minute. But then there was obviously the bullying, the kind of assault, theft, all kinds of horrible things that I've covered that have been happening whilst we were enrolled. So this episode I want to talk about, did we do any good? Did we change anything? Because we certainly didn't get anywhere as far as we don't feel like we were heard or acknowledged as far as our concerns and our struggles in the school. We were just boxed off. To the extent that, this is incredibly petty, but me, my German friend, the people who were in the complaints, as in 2 young female students, a mature student, and there were 2 young female students who were not even part of the complaints, but were communicating with us and trying to help us in ways, but also trying to build a bridge between, the different people, the different parties, and all of us, those 2 girls or young women who were not part of the complaint, the 2 young women who were part of the complaint, the mature student who was part of the complaint, my German friend, all of us were blocked on Instagram by the tutors and the dean. Not the painting tutor, but the other tutors. The replacement sculptor tutor, I probably called the wormy tutor or something like that. The pretentious tutor, the dean's wife, the dean, they blocked us on Instagram. We had no conversation with them on Instagram. We weren't harassing them or using their Instagram in any way. We never submitted stuff from their Instagram as evidence of anything. We submitted evidence from the school. Anything that happened in the school got submitted as evidence. It wasn't a case of looking at their social media and saying, oh, look at what they're doing. So it's a bit suspect that they would block us. Makes you wonder whether there was evidence on there of something. I know that bully number 1 had pictures of him socialising with the wormy tutor and the dean's wife. I saw that. I didn't see the dean or the pretentious tutor in the pictures, but maybe they were there as well. Either way, to have a blanket blocking of us all, it was most shocking to the 2 female students who were part of the complaint, the 2 female students who weren't part of the complaint, and my German friend, because they're all female students who were completely harmless. Not like I wasn't harmless or the mature student wasn't harmless, but I think as blokes and older blokes, I'm kind of in my 40s, you know, he was in his he's in his mid to late 70s. We're quite jaded and pessimistic about the character of some of these people. So we understood them blocking us as a petty, you know, this is all they can do to try and get back at us, as if it gets back at us. But whereas the female students were just completely baffled by it, and I was baffled as well, just thinking like, yeah, it's pathetic, but I don't know why they do it. I have no idea why they do it, but it did make me laugh because it just shows how unprofessional and childlike they are. I have no issue with that. Bully number 1 didn't block us on Instagram, and neither did bully number 2. I don't even think bully number 3 did. It was the faculty. The faculty all blocked us. That's what was funny about it. The bullies were like, yeah, have at it, whatever. But the faculty was like, nope, nope, no more of you. You've tried to put in a complaint about a couple of us, so you're out. You know, terrible. Really, really strange. So yeah, very petty stuff. Again, not mentioned in any complaint because it was too late on when that happened, and it was just comically odd. So did we do any good? I would say that we've obviously affected them. If they're blocking us on Instagram and they've had to go through meetings and explain themselves, because I've got the minutes from the meetings, and that's going to be another episode, which I've already done certain bits from these meetings, but I'm going to do ones where they throw accusations around which are completely unwarranted, because they've had to do that. We've probably put a bit of a scare into them where they won't so readily be able to abuse the rules, I hope, like they did when we were there. I think they'll be a bit more, either that or they'll just protect each other a lot more vigilantly. I'm not sure. Regardless, I think this was the only punishment they're maybe going to get, because we were insistent on being heard and putting our case across. We wouldn't be intimidated, and aside from that little hiccup where they insisted on me taking down the podcast and I didn't, and my friend who I was doing the podcast with ended up apologising to the faculty. If you haven't seen that episode, I will leave a link here. Then that's aside from that, they didn't really get anywhere as far as it was only with my friend who I did the podcast with, and that was unfortunate that they buckled on that. But they were scared. They wanted to have fair treatment from the university, and they didn't know if we were going to get punished for not taking down the podcast. And as much as I told them we're not going to get punished, this is just them trying to make demands that they can't make. Still, there was no reasoning out of it. So I just said, no, I'm not taking down the podcast, and no, I'm not apologising to the bullies. Whereas my friend said, I told him to take down the podcast. It was all his fault. I apologise to everyone. I wanted nothing to do with it. And just a horrible apology that I wish never happened. But I do have more sympathy these days than I did back then. But it was, hurtful at the time. I felt a bit betrayed. That's the only time when they've gained any ground about the complaint, is to try and do damage there, which they did do damage there. So that's unfortunate. Now, what I found interesting was a lot of the students graduate. I am held back for a year as part of a punishment. So the students graduate in, what would it be, June of 2022? No, June of 22 is when we're supposed to all graduate. And on the 19th of January 2022, they send us this email called Studio Code of Practice. We've not seen this before. This was definitely not anything that was ever discussed or sent out, which should have been there. There should have been cameras at the university for people's protection. There should have been this code of practice. There should be rules and regulations to make sure that tutors don't abuse their power. I don't think any of those things are there. But a studio code of practice was all of a sudden sent out. Let's go through it. 1. We expect you to utilize your studio spaces and take the opportunity to engage with other users. Which is a weird thing to send out during a pandemic, because some students don't want to go on campus, or they ended up doing this hybrid system of learning where you'd go in a few days and you'd study from home other days, which caused problems because the tutors, except for the painting tutor, all the other tutors just wouldn't supply the same material for students working from home, because all the bullies would be going in. They wouldn't work a hybrid, which is a common denominator to be found there. But anyway, so the next point: to respect the needs of other users for group critiques and other academic activities. To respect the needs of others for group critiques and other academic activities. Which is a little vague, but it's still a code of practice to respect the needs of others, which means that you shouldn't be able to infringe upon other people's rights and comfort for your own privilege or desires necessarily, which is again quite vague. But I mean, for critiques and academic activities, I don't know what that's about. I wasn't there for critiques, and academic activities is a little bit vague in my opinion. But if you're to utilize your studio spaces and take the opportunity to engage with other users, I suppose they're saying be nice about it. Don't be spiteful, which is ironic, isn't it? Because they're quite spiteful and petty and blocking us on Instagram. Anyway, the next one: to work responsibly and with due care to others. It's almost like they are circling around the same issues that we raised legitimately, and instead of acknowledging it, doing anything about it, they said, no, that's not happening. Maybe we should type up a few rules. So they're kind of trying to have it both ways. So to work responsibly and with due care to others. Number 4, to use personal stereo headphones. Not something they've ever said before. They said you either all agree on who plays the music, how you play the music and what goes on, or no one gets to play music. That's how they said it goes. So this is a change, because it seemed like when we were saying, look, there's been a problem in the studio with the music, it's not that we're saying make there be no music, it's just it got escalated to an unreasonable degree, where one student left the studio crying because she'd been bullied and harassed by 2 mature students, 2 grown men. And that's when they said, well, you either play nice or no one gets to play music, which is sort of a bit of a reductive way of seeing it. So to say to use personal stereo headphones is a reaction to that, I think, to say that this is coming across as noise pollution to the extent that music isn't being played in a way which is fair to everyone. Either somebody else mentioned it, and either it was a reaction to our complaint that somebody else mentioned it, it was a reaction to our complaint that this rule's there, or it's just a coincidence and somebody complained just like we did, and maybe the tutors thought, right, it's not just these complaints, it's also someone else is complaining that they don't like it. Either way, or if it's something else that I haven't thought of, either way it relates to the complaint and it seems pertinent. So there's that. The next one's quite a big one: to respect health and safety guidance and to be aware of the need for risk assessment in the production and presentation of your work. This has to be some kind of response to welding iron and steel or burning crude oil. It has to be. Health and safety guidance and risk assessment. I mean, this should have been there from first year when I was there in 2019. but they introduced it in the third year, 2022, so a little late in the day, but it's still what we wanted as far as protection. So that was an interesting one, and it starts to make me feel like it's a bit of a coincidence that they're saying, be responsible and have due care for others, use personal stereo headphones, respect health and safety guidance, be aware of the need for risk assessment in the production and presentation of your work. It's a bit of a coincidence if it's not to do with our complaint. Maybe it's just me. Let's have a look at the next one. The next one is not to use spray or aerosols in the studio. I mean, come on, it's like they've just taken the complaint and gone, right, let's just go down the list of the complaints and try and improve several of these things. This means that the complaint was legitimate, should have been validated at the time, action should have been taken against the perpetrators. It shouldn't have had to been, expulsion or dismissal or someone being fired or suspension or anything like that. Just, even if it's just a written warning to say, right, what you did goes past the point of a verbal warning. You spray painted over students' spaces, and when they expressed a displeasure with that and then emulsioned over the graffiti that you did it again. That's kind of, that warrants a written warning, I think. The next one is, you must seek advice if any product you use has a hazard warning sticker. So again, it's, probably just thinking we have got some idiots on campus who try to burn crude oil, so maybe we should just give them basic advice here. To seek and take advice if you are unsure of any aspect of your working practice. I'm pretty sure a lot of students who tried to do that couldn't get advice, no matter how much they sought it. Next one is to keep designated fire routes and doors clear and maintain good practice, tidiness and disposal of rubbish. Now, we had in the first year a complete farce of a session where the dean's wife had us walk around the building with a piece of string tied to one gutter, and we got round something like twice. She was saying, we're going to wrap the building up. Can you imagine if there was a fire in the building? That would block fire exits. That would mean that people had to duck or had to kind of climb through string to get out. So this could have applied to her quite easily. Do not tip solvents, terps, etc. down the sinks. Basic good advice should have been there from the first year, if not sooner. To have a basic toolkit for your practice. I mean, why weren't these codes of practice implemented years ago? Respect your studio space. Do not work directly on the walls. This is something which I found weird when I first went into the studio, is that the walls were just horribly scribbled over, and it looked as though there was very little respect for the environment and it needed emulsioning. And then the very last one is to be aware that thefts occur. Look after your own belongings and the universities that you may be using. Be vigilant. Well, that's funny as well, because the mature student who I was friends with, mature student 1, had his toolbox full of his materials stolen. So that's a bit of a coincidence. I'm sure there's been several other thefts as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if bully number 1 or bully number 2 were involved in that theft, because there's a high likelihood they were involved in the theft of the mature student number 1's toolbox full of his stuff. Anyway, I think this shows that what we did have a good impact on the school. There are basic guidelines. There should have been more. They should be clearer, and but there's some kind of protection for students and something for them to fall back on and say, we've got a code of practice that has been broken. So I think that this is the safeguards that we wanted in place to a small extent. They could be far better written and far more extensive than this, but it's something. So I discussed this with my German friend, and her and I agreed that we've done good, that we've done the right thing, we've pushed, and we should have a little pat on the back for what we've done, because there is no way that the mention of headphones, the mention of spray paints, and all the different things in there that relate to the complaint aren't a result of us saying this is unacceptable. But all of these stories lead to the Dirty Corner. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next week for that episode, which should have been this week. So stay tuned, because it'll be worth it. It's a lot of work. Please check it out. Leave a comment. Check out my Patreon. Give me support. Thanks for watching. See you next week.